We believe our homes are sanctuaries, secured by locked doors and quiet streets. But the deepest terror begins when a predator reaches out, weaponizing written words to torment his prey. This arrogance leaves a trail when every new message makes things worse. How does a killer's own vanity seal their fate? In May 2004, the quiet residential streets of Fort Wayne, Indiana, descended into a paralyzing terror. Local residents walking through their neighborhoods discovered crude, handwritten messages taped to the handlebars of young girls' bicycles. The unknown author bypassed vague threats and claimed direct responsibility for a haunting, unsolved cold case from 16 years prior. This faceless phantom promised to strike again, targeting the community's most vulnerable members. Wrapped around these menacing letters were used prophylactics, introducing an invasive biological hazard to an already terrifying psychological assault. Law enforcement officers arrived at the scene and stared at the chilling displays in disbelief. For over a decade and a half, detectives had chased dead ends and empty rumors while the perpetrator remained a ghost. Now, this elusive predator had returned, placing his physical signature in the daylight. The notes proved that the monster was not a memory, but an active resident watching them from the shadows. To understand the profound shock of these 2004 messages, the timeline must rewind to the spring of 1988. Fort Wayne, Indiana, operated as a sprawling blue-collar city anchored by manufacturing plants and dense grid-like residential blocks. Tall oak trees lined the cracked concrete sidewalks, casting long shadows over the modest single-story homes. Chain-link fences separated small backyards, but neighbors left their front doors unlocked during the daylight hours. Families shared an unspoken, ironclad social contract regarding the safety of the neighborhood youth. Adults sitting on their front porches acted as a collective watch, keeping vigilant eyes on the children riding skateboards down the asphalt streets. The dull hum of television sets through screen doors and the rhythmic chirping of cicadas provided the evening soundtrack for this trusting community. Parents felt absolute confidence letting their kids run errands to the corner store or walk multiple blocks to visit classmates. The concept of an apex predator hunting on these sunlit streets felt alien to the residents of this Midwestern hub. This ingrained sense of security formed the very foundation of daily life for every family residing within the city limits. 8-year-old April Tinsley thrived in this environment of boundless community trust. She was a typical, vibrant first grader with a bright smile and an endless reserve of youthful energy. April lived with her mother on the south side of town, in a neighborhood defined by its close proximity to local parks and small family-owned shops. Her daily routine revolved around simple childhood pleasures, like drawing with chalk on the driveway and exploring the nearby grassy fields. Friends remembered her as a dedicated playmate who loved organizing games of hide-and-seek before the streetlights buzzed to life. Her mother worked hard to provide a stable, loving home, relying on the surrounding neighbors to help watch out for April during busy afternoons. The 8-year-old girl possessed a trusting nature shaped by a world that had only ever shown her kindness and protection. She moved freely between the houses of her friends, navigating the familiar concrete paths with absolute confidence. April held a deep love for animals and often stopped to pet the neighborhood dogs resting behind the low metal fences. Her presence brought a distinct light to the block, representing the pure, untouched innocence of the era. The physical layout of April's world consisted of just a few crucial blocks bordered by Fairfield Avenue to the west and Harrison Street to the east. These intersecting roads created a distinct boundary where children felt safe roaming without direct adult supervision. A short walk separated April's front door from the home of her closest friend, requiring only a quick trip down a straight open sidewalk. Visibility remained high across these neighborhood stretches. with no dense woods or blind alleys to conceal illicit activity. Residents parked their vehicles close to the curb, creating a continuous barrier of steel and glass between the pedestrian paths and the main traffic lanes. April knew every crack in the pavement and every intersecting crosswalk along this well-worn route. Her mother established firm rules about boundaries, ensuring April never strayed past the designated safe zones. The local corner market sat just a few streets away, offering an easy destination for quick trips to buy candy and soda. This specific geography fostered a powerful illusion of control for parents who believed they could trace their children's exact steps at any given moment. Nobody recognized that this predictable, grid-like environment also provided the perfect hunting ground for an observant outsider calculating their routines. The unraveling of Fort Wayne's innocence began on the afternoon of Good Friday, April 1st, 1988. A heavy, overcast sky hung over the city as April stepped out of her house to play with a group of friends. She wore a light pink jacket and carried her favorite umbrella to ward off the early spring drizzle. Her mother expected her to return to the house just before the dinner hour, adhering to their standard daily routine. April navigated the damp sidewalks, moving toward a friend's house located a mere 2 blocks from her own front porch. Witnesses later recalled seeing the small girl walking with purpose through the neighborhood around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The hours ticked by, the gray sky darkened, and the sodium streetlights flickered on, casting a harsh yellow glow over the wet pavement. When the designated dinner time arrived without any sign of the 8-year-old, a sharp spike of anxiety hit her household. Her mother dialed the landline phones of every known friend, receiving the exact same terrifying answer from each neighbor. Nobody had seen April since the mid-afternoon, and the once familiar streets suddenly felt vast and menacing. Panic swept through the neighborhood with immense speed as residents realized a child had vanished from their protected enclaves. Dozens of adults grabbed heavy metal flashlights and poured out of their homes into the damp evening air. Search parties formed organically, sweeping through the narrow alleys, checking underneath parked cars, and calling April S.'s name into the darkness. The Fort Wayne Police Department received the frantic distress call and dispatched multiple patrol units to the scene, recognizing the extreme vulnerability of an 8-year-old girl in the elements. Dispatchers bypassed the standard runaway protocol. Officers treated the situation as a critical, high-priority emergency from the very first minute. They established a command post near the family home and divided the surrounding grid into systematic search zones. Uniformed officers knocked on every single door within a 1-mile radius, demanding answers from residents and scanning entryways for any sign of a struggle. Tracking dogs arrived and pressed their noses to the wet asphalt, attempting to isolate the girl's scent amidst the heavy spring rain. The relentless precipitation worked against the searchers, washing away potential footprints and dampening the crucial scent trails left behind on the sidewalk. Entire days blurred together in a frenzy of helicopter spotlights and desperate canvassing efforts, but the neighborhood yielded zero clues. The agonizing uncertainty shattered 3 days later, on the rainy morning of April 4th, 1988. The focus of the nightmare shifted to a rural, isolated area located approximately 20 miles north of April S.'s familiar neighborhood. Deep, muddy drainage ditches ran alongside the lonely stretches of County Road 52, flanked by desolate agricultural fields. A local resident taking a morning jog braved the miserable weather, navigating the gravel shoulder of this remote thoroughfare. Through the curtain of rain, the runner noticed a small, brightly colored object resting in the muddy water of the roadside ditch. Moving closer to investigate the out-of-place shape, the jogger made a grim, devastating discovery. The lost 8-year-old girl had met a brutal, permanent end in this barren environment, miles away from the safety of her mother. Local county deputies rushed to the rural site. Securing the extensive perimeter with layers of yellow barrier tape, crime scene technicians waded into the freezing mud, documenting the exact physical state of the scene before removing the victim. The geographical distance between the abduction site and the recovery zone indicated that the perpetrator possessed a vehicle and a calculated escape plan. This grim reality terrified the Fort Wayne community, proving that a mobile, organized predator now operated within their borders. Investigators converged on the rural trench along County Road 52 to process the grim scene. The relentless spring storm proved a formidable adversary for the crime scene technicians. Freezing rain flooded the steep earthen banks, washing away crucial tire tracks and potential footprints in the mud. Detectives cordoned off a massive square-mile perimeter around the adjacent agricultural fields to conduct a grid search. Dozens of officers walked shoulder to shoulder through the soaked vegetation, searching for physical artifacts left behind by the perpetrator. They discovered the young victim was missing a single shoe, noting this specific detail as withheld evidence to verify future confessions. Aside from this glaring absence, the immediate crime scene yielded a frustrating lack of tangible clues. The torrential downpour cleansed the environment of foreign fibers, latent prints, and trace biological material. Task force members returned to the downtown precinct and began the arduous process of cross-referencing local vehicle registrations. Analysts pulled paper records for every known offender residing within a 50-mile radius of the abduction zone. Detectives fanned out across the county, knocking on the doors of rural farmhouses and questioning transient agricultural workers. They documented every alibi on yellow legal pads, verifying the whereabouts of hundreds of individuals for that specific Friday afternoon. The initial adrenaline of the massive manhunt transitioned into the methodical, exhausting daily grind of an ongoing homicide investigation. Law enforcement established a dedicated command center designed to manage the overwhelming influx of public tips. Uniformed officers sat at rows of folding tables, answering ringing landline phones and documenting every minor suspicion reported by anxious citizens. Detectives spent their mornings driving to local utility companies, interviewing garbage collectors and postal carriers who worked routes near the abduction site. They mapped out every commercial delivery route, hoping to find a driver who had noticed a suspicious vehicle odling on the residential streets. Filing cabinets inside the precinct filled with thick manila folders, each containing dead-end leads and cleared persons of interest. The investigative team generated a massive geographical matrix, pinning photographs and timelines to a corkboard spanning an entire precinct wall. Every morning began with a comprehensive review of the previous day's interviews, searching for inconsistencies in alibis or unusual behavioral patterns. The sheer volume of incoming data required detectives to work double shifts, fueled by cheap diner coffee and a desperate need for justice. During this extensive canvassing process, investigators zeroed in on a primary local suspect who exhibited deeply concerning behavior during standard questioning. This individual lived within striking distance of the victim's neighborhood and provided conflicting statements regarding his location on the day of the abduction. The task force funneled significant resources into investigating this primary suspect, initiating continuous physical surveillance of his daily movements. Undercover officers trailed his vehicle through the city streets, documenting his routine stops and attempting to identify predatory patterns. Detectives obtained search warrants based on circumstantial behavioral evidence, seizing personal items from his residence to look for a physical link. Laboratory technicians extracted trace biological samples from the seized property, hoping to match them to the microscopic evidence recovered from the rural ditch. The forensic technology available in the late 1980s relied on primitive blood typing and early, unstable methods of genetic profiling. Scientists required large, pristine quantities of organic material to generate even a rudimentary sequence. a luxury the compromised crime scene did not provide. The extracted samples proved too degraded for the era's standard forensic equipment to establish a definitive, undeniable connection. The laboratory results officially excluded the prime suspect from the investigation, dealing a crushing psychological blow to the exhausted task force. Detectives watched their most promising avenue of inquiry evaporate, forcing them to dismantle the surveillance operation and return to the beginning. They boxed up the suspect's files and placed them in the archives, a stark reminder of the limitations of modern science. The grueling investigation stretched into the year 1990 with detectives continuing their daily routine of re-interviewing old witnesses and chasing fading rumors. The physical landscape of the crime scene had changed with the seasons, but the psychological wound remained fresh for the rural community. Just a short distance from the original recovery ditch on County Road 52 stood an old, weathered wooden barn facing the desolate highway. Early one morning, a passing motorist noticed crude, aggressive lettering scrawled across the massive sliding door of this agricultural structure. Patrol officers responded to the desolate stretch of road and found a terrifying message written in dark, bold strokes onto the rough wood. The unknown author claimed responsibility for ending the 8-year-old girl's life, boasting about his invisible status within the community. To prove his authenticity, the writer mocked the Fort Wayne Police Department regarding the specific piece of footwear missing from the crime scene. Law enforcement had guarded this exact detail regarding the absent shoe, confirming the actual perpetrator held the marker. Crime scene investigators arrived with heavy equipment, dismantling the barn door and transporting the massive wooden planks back to the laboratory. Technicians applied chemical reagents and specialized dusting powders to the timber, trying to lift a latent fingerprint from the vandalized surface. The porous, splintered texture of the aged wood absorbed the oils from the author's skin, rendering standard fingerprint extraction impossible. The perpetrator had taunted the entire task force while leaving absolutely no usable physical trace of his identity behind. Following the barn door incident, detectives committed themselves to a rigid protocol of evidence preservation and continuous case review. They cataloged the physical remnants of the investigation, sealing garments and wooden planks inside climate-controlled lockers at the Central Evidence Facility. Lead investigators maintained a daily schedule of reviewing the original case files, searching for overlooked names buried deep within the typed interview transcripts. Officers assigned to the cold case unit made regular visits to the victim's family, offering unwavering support while delivering the agonizing news of zero progress. Retiring detectives handed over the voluminous boxes of files to younger officers, ensuring institutional knowledge remained intact within the department. These new investigators re-examined the initial neighborhood canvass reports from 1988, verifying the addresses of every resident on the block. They contacted out-of-state law enforcement agencies, requesting reports on similar localized crimes and comparing the physical descriptions of known transient offenders. The department submitted continuous inquiries to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, cross-referencing behavioral profiles with unsolved cases across the American Midwest. Forensic technicians conducted periodic inspections of the sealed evidence bags, ensuring the protective packaging remained intact to prevent any environmental contamination. The investigative team operated on a singular, enduring hope that scientific advancements would catch up to the meticulous preservation of their evidence. They held their positions on the front line of this silent war, protecting the physical artifacts while waiting for the unseen adversary to make a critical mistake. The perpetrator's arrogant compulsion to terrorize the city forced him out of the shadows in May of the year 2004. Returning to the residential grid of Fort Wayne, the assailant targeted the exact neighborhoods where young children parked their bicycles on open driveways. He attached horrifying handwritten threats to the handlebars, reviving the terror of the 1988 tragedy. The author used prophylactics around these notes, leaving behind pristine, uncompromised biologic material in a brazen display of overconfidence. Patrol officers secured the targeted bicycles, treating the driveways as active high-level crime scenes to protect the delicate trace evidence. Forensic specialists wearing protective suits utilized sterile cotton swabs to collect the genetic material left behind on the horrifying packages. They transported the sealed vials to the state laboratory, where advanced technology extracted a complete high-resolution biological profile of the unknown male. Detectives possessed the absolute, undeniable genetic signature of the predator, providing the most significant breakthrough in the history of the department. Technicians uploaded the complete profile into the National Law Enforcement Database, initiating a comprehensive digital sweep across millions of registered criminal records. The computer system completed its exhaustive search and returned a devastating, agonizing result of 0 matches across all jurisdictions. The rigid protocols of the database required the offender to have a previous felony conviction on record to trigger a positive identification. Because this specific predator had managed to avoid major legal scrutiny for his entire life, the massive federal system remained completely blind to his existence. The investigation entered another intense phase of evidence maintenance, with the complete biological profile securely locked inside the digital archives. Detectives continued to run the profile through the national database every single month, hoping the perpetrator would slip up and trigger a standard arrest. The breakthrough arrived in the year 2018. Driven by the rapid, groundbreaking evolution of advanced forensic genealogy, law enforcement agencies realized they could bypass the strict, limited parameters of the standard government databases by utilizing open-source ancestral networks. The Fort Wayne Task Force partnered with a specialized private laboratory equipped to map out complex multi-generational family trees. Technicians submitted the pristine biological profile extracted from the 2004 bicycles to commercial genetic platforms designed for civilian heritage tracking. The private laboratory identified distant cousins sharing distinct genetic markers with the unidentified profile, establishing a foundational biological lineage. Expert genealogists utilized public census records, birth certificates, and local obituaries to trace this ancestral line forward through the decades. They constructed a massive branching family tree on heavy white poster board, eliminating female relatives and deceased male family members. The genealogists narrowed the vast web of distant relatives down to 2 distinct brothers residing within the immediate geographical area of Fort Wayne. Detectives analyzed the known residences of both men, cross-referencing their specific locations with the 1988 abduction zone and the 2004 bicycle threats. The intricate, undeniable path of microscopic science pointed directly at a quiet, unassuming local resident who had hidden in plain sight for 30 years. By July 2018, the sprawling investigative web contracted into a highly localized, covert surveillance operation targeting a single mobile home park in Grabille, just northeast of Fort Wayne. Narrow, pothole-riddled asphalt roads wound through tight rows of identical, weathered aluminum trailers with peeling paint and overgrown patches of yellowing grass. Investigators established a discreet perimeter around the residence of John Miller, an unassuming man who blended perfectly into this quiet, low-income enclave. From unmarked vehicles parked deep in the shadows of bordering oak trees, detectives monitored his mundane daily routine through heavy binoculars. Miller wore the flawless mask of an ordinary citizen, adhering to a predictable schedule that revealed absolutely no hint of the monster lurking beneath his skin. Task Force members understood they needed an abandoned biological sample to legally bypass the strict constitutional protections surrounding forced genetic extraction. The opportunity materialized when Miller carried his weekly household refuse to the metal collection bins positioned at the edge of the gravel lot. Plainclothes officers waited for the loud metallic clang of the dumpster lid before moving in to secure the discarded garbage bags. Technicians transported the refuse back to the state laboratory, carefully sifting through the foul-smelling contents to locate items carrying trace epibrimal cells. Forensic scientists isolated genetic material from the abandoned trash and loaded the microscopic sequence into the comparison matrix. The computer required mere hours to process the data, analyzing the specific ancestral markers against the pristine profile pulled from the 2004 bicycle threats. The laboratory director placed the decisive phone call to the command center, delivering the news the department had awaited for exactly 30 years. The discarded trash provided a definitive, undeniable biological match to the menacing notes, officially confirming John Miller as the elusive apex predator. Armed with an ironclad arrest warrant, the task force mobilized a tactical unit to breach the quiet perimeter of the mobile home park. Heavy black boots crushed the dry gravel as heavily armed officers surrounded the rusted aluminum siding of the trailer. Lead detectives approached the flimsy front door, knocking with the full authority of a unified, relentless justice system. The heavy metallic click of the interior deadbolt echoed through the humid summer air before John Miller stood face to face with the towering officers. The investigators did not draw their weapons or shout aggressive commands, opting instead for a deliberate psychological approach. A senior detective locked eyes with the unassuming man and asked a single piercing question regarding why law enforcement had finally arrived at his doorstep. The imposing physical presence of the unified task force shattered the fragile illusion of control the predator had maintained for 3 decades. Miller stared back at the officers with dead, hollow eyes, exhibiting absolutely no shock or confusion at the overwhelming police presence. A chilling, heavy silence hung over the narrow wooden porch while the mundane sounds of distant highway traffic echoed in the background. With a terrifyingly calm and monotone voice, the suspect broke the silence and delivered a crushing 2-word answer. He simply uttered the name of the 8-year-old girl whose future he had stolen, officially surrendering the dark secret he had harbored since 1988. The arrogant compulsion to terrorize the innocent youth of Fort Wayne through handwritten notes had delivered his ultimate downfall. By placing his biological signature onto those bicycles to mock the grieving community, the Phantom had unknowingly forged the exact chain of evidence that bound his wrists in heavy steel cuffs. Inside the bleak, windowless interrogation rooms of the downtown precinct, John Miller formally confessed to the decades-old abduction and taking of the young girl's life. The meticulous documentation provided by the unified task force left the defense team with absolutely zero room to maneuver or manipulate the legal proceedings. Prosecutors utilized the undeniable biological match to corner the predator, threatening him with the ultimate penalty allowed by the state judicial system. In December 2018, Miller stood before a somber courtroom and entered a formal plea of guilty to avoid capital punishment. The presiding judge delivered a scathing condemnation of the horrific acts, sentencing the aging man to 80 years within the harsh concrete walls of the state penitentiary. This massive judicial decree ensured the arrogant monster would draw his final breath surrounded by cold iron bars, permanently isolated from civil society. The dedicated detectives who had preserved the physical evidence through decades of technological darkness watched from the gallery, their exhaustive efforts finally vindicated. The grieving mother and the fractured Fort Wayne community finally received the definitive closure they had been brutally denied for 30 agonizing years. The invisible phantom who had shattered a trusting neighborhood was reduced to an unremarkable prisoner wearing a standardized bright orange uniform. The flawless execution of modern microscopic science had achieved a total victory over a predator who believed he possessed a superior intellect. The profound triumph of justice in Indiana closed one of the most haunting chapters in American true crime, proving that time cannot protect the guilty. Yet, While genetic genealogy brought this specific nightmare to a definitive end, other historical predators relied on entirely different methods to torment law enforcement. Far away from the quiet Midwestern streets, another arrogant phantom decided to initiate a horrifying game of cat and mouse using the public telephone network. The dispatcher at the Vallejo Police Department picked up the ringing receiver in the early morning darkness of July 5, 1969. A voice on the other end of the line spoke in a measured, flat monotone. The caller reported a severe incident at the Blue Rock Springs Park parking lot. He directed officers to the exact location of a violent assault that had unfolded under the night sky. The man claimed full responsibility for the devastating attack, projecting a chilling composure. The voice then offered a grim confession to another unsolved tragedy from the previous year. The dispatcher scrambled to keep the man speaking while colleagues traced the electrical signal. Law enforcement tracked the connection to a public payphone outside a gas station on Tulum Street. The booth stood a mere 3 blocks from the police station itself, placing the perpetrator within a short walking distance of his pursuers. This brazen communication introduced a phantom who craved the spotlight and initiated a campaign of psychological warfare against the public. The San Francisco Bay Area in the late 1960s served as a vibrant epicenter of cultural revolution and sweeping social change. Neon signs illuminated the dense city streets while peace movements reshaped the political landscape. A short drive away, the suburban communities of Vallejo and Benicia maintained a traditional way of life. Modest tract homes with faded paint lined quiet, tree-canopied residential blocks. Sodium streetlights cast long shadows over manicured lawns and empty sidewalks during the evening hours. Families felt secure behind simple locking screen doors and unlocked windows. The local economy depended on the nearby Mare Island Naval Shipyard, providing steady employment and a strong sense of community. Neighbors knew each other by name and attended weekly community gatherings without a second thought regarding personal safety. The local police department spent their shifts handling standard burglaries, minor traffic infractions, and occasional noise complaints. Complex, coordinated violence remained a foreign concept to the patrol officers navigating these peaceful streets. Detectives operated with limited forensic tools, relying on footprint casts and basic fingerprint dusting to solve routine property crimes. The sharp contrast between the bustling urban center of San Francisco and the quiet isolation of Vallejo created an illusion of total sanctuary. Residents viewed the sprawling hills and dense brush surrounding their towns as scenic backdrops rather than potential hunting grounds. High school students and young adults in Vallejo established their own weekend routines away from the watchful eyes of their parents. Teenagers frequented secluded rural parks and isolated gravel turnouts along the winding county roads. Lake Herman Road stretched like a dark ribbon through the desolate hills, offering total privacy for young couples. Heavy oak trees and dense chaparral bordered the narrow asphalt, blocking out the glow of the distant town. The drone of insects and the rustling of dry leaves provided the only soundtrack in the pitch-black wilderness. Local youth viewed these isolated spots as harmless hangouts for sharing secrets and escaping the confines of their suburban homes. Parents felt no concern when their teenagers borrowed the family vehicle for a Friday night drive into the countryside. The community lacked any historical precedent for random predatory violence targeting their children. David Faraday represented the ideal Vallejo teenager, earning high marks in school and dedicating his free time to the Eagle Scouts. Betty Lou Jensen matched his pristine reputation, known throughout her high school for her gentle demeanor and bright future. The two students attended classes, participated in school dances, and walked the familiar hallways of their local campus. They planned their first official date for the evening of December 20th, a milestone event shared with excited friends. Neither of them recognized the inherent vulnerability of the dark, isolated landscapes surrounding their hometown. The winter air carried a biting chill as the sun dipped below the horizon on that fateful Friday. Families retreated inside their heated homes, gathering around television sets to watch the evening news broadcasts. David polished his mother's Rambler station wagon, preparing the vehicle for his special evening with Betty Lou. He drove across town, parked by the curb, and walked up the concrete path to the Jensen residence. Betty Lou met him at the front door wearing a festive holiday dress. The young couple promised her parents they would return before the stroke of midnight. They left the bright porch light behind and entered the cold, dark interior of the station wagon. Their initial plan involved attending a local holiday concert, but the lure of a quiet evening steered them toward the outskirts of town. The vehicle navigated through the illuminated residential streets before turning onto the unlit stretch of Lake Herman Road. David steered the Rambler into a familiar gravel turnout located near a gated pumping station. A thick wall of darkness engulfed the parked car, severing all visual connections to the safety of Vallejo. The teenagers settled into the front seat, unaware of a set of headlights cutting through the night behind them. The nightmare materialized in the absolute darkness of December 20th, 1968. An unidentified vehicle pulled into the gravel turnout. Parking a short distance from the Rambler, the crunch of heavy tires on the loose stones shattered the quiet intimacy of the isolated lover's lane. A lone figure stepped out into the freezing winter air, holding a .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol. The assailant approached the passenger side of the station wagon, demanding the terrified teenagers exit their vehicle. David and Betty Lou hesitated in the cramped front seat, trapped between the locked doors and the armed stranger. The predator fired several warning shots into the roof and rear window to shatter their resistance. The deafening cracks of gunfire echoed off the surrounding hillsides and forced the couple out into the cold night. Betty Lou emerged first, scrambling out the passenger door in a desperate bid to escape. David followed her lead, stepping onto the freezing gravel to confront the immediate threat. The attacker raised his weapon and unleashed a barrage of bullets with mechanical precision. David met a brutal permanent end before he could even register the fatal strike. Betty Lou ran down the dark asphalt road, sprinting for her life toward the distant town. The assailant tracked her movements, firing 5 deliberate shots into her back, ending her future on the desolate shoulder of the highway. The unknown figure then returned to his vehicle, started the engine, and vanished into the night without leaving a single personal item behind. A passing motorist noticed the stationary Rambler and the bodies lying on the frozen ground a brief time after the incident. Patrol cars from the Solano County Sheriff Office rushed to the gravel turnout, their red and blue lights piecing the rural darkness. First responders secured the perimeter, setting up portable floodlights to illuminate the tragic scene. Investigators combed through the icy gravel, searching for tire tracks, discarded cigarette butts, or dropped weapons. They found only 10 shell casings from the .22 caliber pistol scattered near the station wagon. Detectives faced a complete absence of physical evidence, lifting 0 usable fingerprints from the exterior of the victim's vehicle. The lack of a clear motive baffled law enforcement officials accustomed to acts driven by passion or financial gain. The victims possessed no known enemies, carried no significant cash, and engaged in no dangerous activities. The unprovoked, methodical nature of the assault hinted at a chilling reality beyond standard local crime. News of the devastating event spread through the community by morning, replacing the holiday cheer with overwhelming dread. Parents instituted strict curfews and warned their children to avoid the rural outskirts of the county. Detectives interviewed hundreds of classmates and scored personal diaries, finding nothing but innocent teenage routines. This tragic event initiated a massive wave of local anxiety that gripped the entire Bay Area. No one yet realized this horrific night marked the genesis of a phantom preparing to plunge the state into years of unprecedented psychological terror. Law enforcement officers dedicated the spring of 1969 to chasing minor leads connected to the Lake Herman Road tragedy. Detectives interviewed former boyfriends, searched local high school lockers, and followed up on anonymous tip lines with zero success. The absence of physical evidence created a rigid barrier for the Solano County Sheriff Office. Citizens gradually resumed their normal routines as the heavy winter rains gave way to the warm summer months. The illusion of safety returned to Vallejo until the evening of July 4th. Darlene Farron and Michael Mageau navigated their vehicle away from the noisy holiday celebrations downtown. They sought quiet conversation at the Blue Rock Springs Park, located a few miles east of the city center. The park featured a desolate, unlit asphalt parking lot surrounded by a dense barrier of towering eucalyptus trees. A lone vehicle pulled in behind their parked car shortly before the stroke of midnight. A blinding flashlight beam cut through the darkness, disorienting the two young occupants. The unseen assailant approached the passenger side window without uttering a single word. The predator fired 5 rapid shots from a 9mm semi-automatic weapon into the confined space. The attacker retreated to his vehicle, paused upon hearing a painful gasp, and returned to fire 2 additional rounds. Darlene Farron met a tragic, irreversible fate, while Michael Mageau miraculously survived the devastating assault to provide a basic physical description. Investigators canvassed the Vallejo area for weeks, compiling lists of local men matching the vague profile of a heavy-set white male. The investigative trajectory shattered on August 1, 1969, when the assailant shifted from physical violence to psychological warfare. Mail carriers delivered handwritten envelopes to the offices of 3 major Bay Area newspapers simultaneously. The letters contained arrogant demands for front-page publication and threatened further violence against civilians. Each envelope held 1/3 of a complex 408-symbol cryptogram. The author claimed this elaborate cipher concealed his true identity. Police departments and federal agencies devoted extensive resources toward breaking the code, utilizing early computer technology to analyze repeating patterns. The official intelligence community struggled to find a solution, prompting local newspapers to publish the symbols for the general public. Donald Hardin, a high school history teacher, and his wife Betty spent their weekend analyzing the strange characters at their kitchen table. The couple successfully mapped the underlying substitution cipher by identifying recurring symbols they believed represented common letters. They decoded a chilling manifesto detailing the author's twisted belief that hunting humans offered the ultimate thrill. The translated text revealed profound spelling errors and erratic thought patterns. However, the message failed to provide any actual name or identifying information regarding the predator. The elaborate puzzle served only to stroke the ego of a man desperate for a captive audience. Law enforcement agencies across multiple counties established joint task forces to process the influx of civilian tips generated by the cryptogram. Detectives worked grueling 12-hour shifts, reviewing thousands of pages of public records to find individuals matching the erratic handwriting. The scorching heat of late September arrived while the police remained trapped in a maze of administrative dead ends. College students Celia Ann Shepard and Brian Calvin Hartnell decided to spend the afternoon of September 27th resting in Napa County. They drove to Lake Berryessa, a massive man-made reservoir surrounded by steep, rolling hills and dry yellow grass. The geography of the lake featured numerous isolated coves accessible only by narrow dirt paths. The couple hiked down a steep incline to a secluded peninsula known as Twin Oak Ridge. They laid a blanket on the sandy shore, positioned merely a few yards from the calm water reflecting the afternoon sun. A vast expanse of open terrain separated their quiet spot from the nearest paved roadway. High ridges on either side of the cove naturally amplified sounds while simultaneously blocking any line of sight to the main highway. The isolation provided an idyllic setting for an afternoon picnic far removed from the anxieties of the city. Neither student noticed the strange man observing them from the tree line high above their position. The figure began a slow, deliberate descent down the grassy slope, stepping carefully to minimize the rustling of the dry vegetation. Celia Shepard noticed the approaching stranger only when he closed the distance to a mere 20 feet. The man stepped out from the shadow of a large oak tree wearing a terrifying handmade executioner's hood. The dark fabric completely concealed his head and draped down over his shoulders, secured tightly around his neck. A large white cross positioned over a circle adorned the center of the chest piece. The assailant wore clip-on sunglasses over the eye holes, rendering his face entirely invisible. He brandished a heavy firearm and ordered the terrified students to lie face down on their blanket. The predator produced pre-cut lengths of plastic clothesline and forced Cecilia to bind Brian's wrists behind his back. He then secured Cecilia's restraints before systematically tightening the knots, holding Brian. The assailant suddenly holstered his firearm and drew a heavy military-style bladed weapon from a wooden sheath. He inflicted severe devastating wounds upon both helpless victims in a sudden escalation of unprovoked aggression. The attacker marched back up the steep hill, leaving the students fighting for survival on the remote shoreline. He located Brian's vehicle parked on the dirt shoulder of the main road. Using a thick black marker, the assailant wrote the dates of his previous Valjo strikes directly onto the car door. He added the current date and indicated his chosen weapon before vanishing into the Napa County wilderness. Brian Hartnell survived the horrific ordeal to provide a chilling account, but Celia Shepard succumbed to her massive injuries days later in a local medical center. Panic radiated through the surrounding counties as law enforcement realized the predator possessed a willingness to operate in broad daylight. Detectives organized constant patrols around rural parks and reservoirs, hoping to intercept the man during his next excursion. The assailant circumvented this massive rural police presence by drastically altering his operational geography in early October 1969. He abandoned the desolate country roads in favor of the dense, highly populated urban grid of San Francisco. Paul Steen drove his yellow taxicab through the bustling theater district near Union Square on the evening of October 11th. The working-class driver picked up a solitary male passenger, requesting transport to the affluent neighborhood of Presio Heights. The vehicle traveled away from the bright neon signs of downtown, navigating the steep, grid-like streets toward the northwestern edge of the city. The requested destination sat at the intersection of Washington and Cherry Streets, a quiet residential enclave bordered by a sprawling military park. Stein pulled the cab over to the dark curb alongside a high stone wall and heavy foliage. The passenger did not offer payment upon reaching the quiet intersection. The man instead produced a firearm and ended the driver's life with a single point-blank discharge. The assailant leaned into the front compartment, removed a set of keys, and took the victim's wallet. He then systematically tore a large stained piece of fabric from the driver's shirt, securing the dark trophy before wiping the dashboard with a cloth. 3 teenagers watching from a second-story window directly across the street witnessed the chaotic scene unfolding inside the illuminated cab. They immediately dialed the emergency operator to report a vicious assault in progress. The witnesses provided a clear, accurate description of a heavy-set white male wearing a dark jacket and thick-rimmed glasses. A catastrophic breakdown in basic communication protocols derailed the entire response effort within seconds. The emergency dispatcher hastily transcribed the information and broadcast an alert for a black male suspect over the police radio network. This specific administrative failure stemmed from a chaotic command structure where dispatchers routinely summarized frantic calls without requesting vital clarifications. Patrol officers Donald Fouke and Eric Zelms raced toward the intersection with their emergency lights off to avoid alerting the perpetrator. The two officers spotted a heavy-set white male walking down Jackson Street just 2 blocks from the stationary taxi. The man matched the actual physical appearance of the predator perfectly. The officers slowed their cruiser, but ultimately drove right past the individual. They operated under the strict flawed parameters of the dispatcher's broadcast, ignoring their own visual intuition. The suspect calmly turned north and disappeared into the vast, unlit wilderness of the Presidio military base. An absurd administrative error and a rigid reliance on flawed radio traffic provided an immediate escape route for the most wanted man in California. The monumental scale of the systemic failure became painfully apparent 2 days after the tragedy in Presidio Heights. Mailroom workers at the San Francisco Chronicle opened a standard white envelope containing a taunting letter addressed to the editor. The sender included the stained fabric remnant taken directly from Paul Steen's clothing as indisputable proof of his identity. The letter cruelly mocked the police department, explicitly detailing how 2 officers stopped to look at him before driving away. Detectives descended upon the Presidio with tracking dogs and massive search teams, but the cold trail yielded 0 physical clues. Investigators channeled their profound frustration into analyzing thousands of incoming public tips and potential suspects. The Vallejo Police Department heavily scrutinized a primary person of interest named Arthur Leigh Allen based on circumstantial connections and disturbing personal habits. Allen possessed a watch matching the brand name used by the killer and resided near the original Vallejo crime scenes. Detectives secured search warrants for his residence, aggressively scouring his property for the executioner's hood or the missing wallet. The intensive search produced a staggering lack of definitive physical evidence connecting him to any specific crime. Leading handwriting experts analyzed numerous writing samples provided by Allen, universally concluding his script did not match the infamous letters. The rigid demands of the legal system prevented authorities from securing an indictment based solely on eerie coincidences and strange behavior. The investigation slammed into a devastating dead end, leaving law enforcement paralyzed while the invisible predator prepared his most horrifying psychological strike. The psychological warfare reached a terrifying zenith mere weeks after the San Francisco tragedy. A new envelope arrived at the local newspaper offices bearing the familiar, chaotic handwriting. The author abandoned cryptic ciphers for a blunt, devastating threat aimed directly at the community. He detailed a comprehensive plan targeting the most vulnerable members of society. He mapped out a specific, horrific scenario involving a morning school commute. The Phantom outlined his intention to position himself along a desolate stretch of a rural highway. He claimed he would shoot out the front tire of a moving school bus with a high-powered rifle. He planned to wait for the terrified children to exit the disabled vehicle. The letter explicitly described attacking the youth one by one as they stepped onto the asphalt. This single piece of paper weaponized the daily routine of every family in the state. The predator recognized that threatening children generated an entirely different magnitude of public terror. He transformed the basic concept of public education into a landscape of overwhelming dread. A historic wave of mass panic paralyzed the entire state of California immediately following the publication of the letter. Parents refused to send their children to local campuses, barricading their doors against the unseen threat. The physical geography of morning commutes transformed into militarized zones overnight. Heavy transport vehicles rolled out of local bus depots under intense armed guard. Police departments assigned heavily armed tactical officers to ride inside the yellow transit buses alongside the terrified students. Solano County deputies in marked patrol cars followed directly behind the daily transit routes to intercept any approaching vehicles. Helicopters circled above the sprawling suburban grids, scanning the tree lines and high ridges for any sign of a hidden assailant. The Phantom paralyzed massive municipal infrastructures without firing a single weapon or stepping out of the shadows. The daily journey to elementary schools became a high-stakes tactical operation for thousands of innocent civilians. Every shadow along the highway morphed into a potential threat. Law enforcement agencies drained municipal budgets, maintaining the heavy security presence across multiple jurisdictions. The unseen predator held millions of citizens hostage through pure psychological manipulation. The entire West Coast held its collective breath, waiting for a devastating strike. The immense tension stretched into the following weeks and months as the heavy winter rains returned. Authorities braced for the promised strike on the rural highways with unwavering vigilance. The attack on the school buses never materialized. The Phantom instead continued his reign of terror solely through the regional postal system. He sent greeting cards, complex maps, and rambling claims of unseen attacks to local journalists. The written communications grew increasingly erratic and demanding over the next few years. The letters abruptly stopped arriving at the newspaper offices in the year 1974. The sudden, unexplained silence proved just as terrifying as the constant threats. The public waited in a state of suspended dread for a grand finale that refused to come. Law enforcement saturated the media with composite sketches and behavioral profiles to no avail. The heavy police presence gradually faded from the transit routes as years turned into decades. The man who craved the spotlight simply vanished into the crowded urban landscape. He left behind a fractured society and a legacy of absolute paranoia. Decades of ongoing investigations failed to unmask the man behind the cryptic letters and the devastating attacks. Multi-jurisdictional task forces analyzed tens of thousands of suspect files over the ensuing half-century. Detectives repeatedly circled back to Arthur Lee Allen as their primary person of interest. Investigators maintained their intense scrutiny of his past movements, his physical proximity to the crimes, and his erratic behavior. The legal system required definitive physical proof to secure a formal indictment. Law enforcement simply could not build a prosecutable case on circumstantial oddities and strange coincidences. Arthur Leigh Allen passed away in the year 1992 from natural causes. His death effectively extinguished the most promising investigative avenue in the entire massive case. The San Francisco Police Department ultimately marked the sprawling file as inactive in the year 2004. The official classification recognized the devastating lack of modern investigative leads and the passing of crucial witnesses. Public pressure and evolving technology forced authorities to reopen the historic case file in the year 2007. Detectives organized the aging evidence boxes, hoping modern science could finally accomplish what traditional police work could not. The dawn of advanced forensic technology offered a final glimmer of hope for definitive closure. Laboratory technicians extracted genetic material directly from the adhesive on the original postage stamps mailed in 1969. Analysts processed the microscopic evidence through massive state and federal criminal databases. The scientific results definitively excluded Arthur Leigh Allen as the source of the biological material on the envelopes. Global interest surged again following the release of a high-profile documentary in the year 2024. Amateur sleuths and professional analysts continue to propose new suspects on a daily basis across endless internet forums. The families of David Faraday, Betty Lou Jensen, Darlene Ferrin, Cecilia Shepard, and Paul Steen remained trapped in a perpetual cycle of unanswered questions. The legal system failed to deliver basic moral justice to the innocent victims who lost their futures to a phantom. The taunting messages forever altered the cultural landscape of the American law enforcement apparatus. The predator who terrorized the California coast cemented his dark legacy as the nation's most infamous unsolved mystery. Yet, while the West Coast grappled with a ghost who vanished into the dense fog, the East Coast was about to face a very real predator who announced his terrifying arrival through a handwritten letter left on a cold New York street. In April 1977, investigators sifting through a fresh crime scene in the Bronx found a hand-printed letter resting near the pavement. The envelope bore the name of New York City Police Department Captain Joseph Borelli, and the pages inside contained rambling, bizarre statements about demons and dark urges. The author mocked law enforcement, introducing a moniker that would soon paralyze millions of residents, the Son of Sam. The physical presence of this taunting letter shattered a fragile local hope, confirming the worst fears of detectives standing under the amber streetlights. The unprovoked nocturnal attacks across the city were not isolated events, but the highly organized work of a single, elusive predator. The year 1976 cast a heavy, suffocating shadow over New York City. A severe financial crisis had drained the municipal budget, leaving basic city services critically underfunded and infrastructure crumbling under the weight of neglect. Trash piled high on the cracked sidewalks, and peeling paint marked the facades of once pristine apartment buildings. Despite the looming sense of urban decay and soaring crime rates in the commercial districts, outer borough neighborhoods in the Bronx and Queens maintained a defensive, tight-knit sense of local community. Residents looked out for one another from the stoops of their brick row houses. The city was a place of stark contrasts where the neon glow of sodium streetlights illuminated both vibrant social lives and deep socioeconomic anxieties. Young people navigated this grit, seeking out nightlife as a crucial escape from the sweltering concrete. Discotheques pulsed with heavy bass lines, drawing crowds of teenagers and young adults eager to forget the daytime struggles. For those lacking the funds for crowded clubs, the quiet residential parking strips offered a free private sanctuary. Cars lined the avenues under the dense canopy of elm trees, serving as rolling living rooms where couples and friends could talk deep into the humid night. The inhabitants fundamentally believed that their specific blocks, guarded by watchful neighbors, offered an unshakable baseline of safety. This illusion of security remained unchallenged, masking the absolute vulnerability of those sitting inside parked vehicles. Donna LaLaurie was an 18-year-old medical technician, a young woman known for her bright ambition and deep devotion to her family. She spent her days navigating the bustling corridors of a local hospital, dedicating her time to helping others while carefully planning a secure future. Her close friend, 19-year-old Jody Valenti, shared a similar vibrant spirit and worked diligently as a nurse. The two women represented the beating heart of their Bronx community, embodying the hope and resilience of a generation trying to build a life amidst urban decline. Their daily routines consisted of long shifts, family dinners, and the cherished weekend freedom that came with a set of car keys. On the sweltering night of July 29, 1976, the pair sought relief from the oppressive summer heat by visiting a popular local discotheque in New Rochelle. After several hours of dancing and sharing stories, they decided to end their evening and drove back to Donna S. neighborhood in the Pelham Bay section of the Bronx. The drive took roughly 30 minutes, tracing a path down the quiet, deserted stretches of the Hutchinson River Parkway. Jody navigated her dark blue Oldsmobile sedan through the familiar grid of residential streets, eventually pulling the vehicle tight against the curb directly outside Donna S. family apartment building on Bouthard Avenue. The geographical layout of Bouthard Avenue offered a false sense of absolute security, featuring well-lit sidewalks bordered by uniform brick facades and narrow alleyways. The two friends sat in the front seats of the parked car with the engine off. The windows rolled down to catch a faint nighttime breeze. They talked quietly under the amber glow of a nearby street lamp, unaware of the shadows shifting in the narrow spaces between the buildings just yards away. At approximately 1 o'clock in the morning, the quiet hum of cicadas on Bouthard Avenue was abruptly shattered. Donna Loria pushed open the heavy passenger door of the Oldsmobile, placing one foot onto the concrete sidewalk to begin the short, familiar walk up to her front door. At that precise second, an unknown man stepped out from the deep shadows of the adjacent alleyway, rapidly closing the 15-foot distance to the vehicle. He moved with a chilling, deliberate silence, offering no demands, shouting no threats, and displaying absolutely no hesitation. In his hands, the stranger held a large, heavy .44 caliber bulldog revolver, a weapon capable of delivering massive, devastating force. He raised the firearm level with the passenger side window, taking aim from mere inches away. A deafening roar echoed down the residential block as the assailant fired repeatedly into the consigned space of the vehicle. Donna sustained catastrophic injuries instantly struck by the massive projectiles before she could even process the presence of the man standing over her. Jody Valenti recoiled in sheer terror, hit in the thigh by another round as shattered safety glass rained down across the vinyl seats. The attacker turned on his heel without uttering a single word, melting back into the darkness of the city streets as quickly as he had appeared. Donna Lauria met a brutal, permanent end right on the threshold of her family home. Her bright future stolen in a fraction of a second. The sudden explosive noise sent panicked neighbors rushing out onto their fire escapes, but the silent shooter had already vanished. First responders descended upon the Pelham Bay neighborhood within minutes, finding a chaotic scene illuminated by the spinning red lights of emergency vehicles. Jody Valenti, in a state of severe shock and immense physical pain, could only provide investigators with a fragmented, vague description of the assailant. She recalled a white male of average build who attacked without warning and disappeared into the night without attempting to open the car doors or demand a purse. Detectives from the New York City Police Department cordoned off the block, scanning the pavement for clues, but the physical evidence was maddeningly scarce. The complete absence of any robbery, sexual assault, or prior personal connection between the victims and the shooter left seasoned investigators perplexed. Typically, crimes of this magnitude in the outer boroughs stemmed from deeply personal disputes or organized criminal enterprises. This attack, however, bore the chilling hallmarks of total randomness, striking two innocent women who had absolutely no enemies. Detectives canvassed the surrounding apartment buildings, knocking on heavy wooden doors and interviewing countless residents, yet no one possessed actionable intelligence regarding the silent stranger. The .44 caliber rounds recovered from the twisted metal of the cord. Oldsmobile provided the only tangible starting point for the ballistics team. Law enforcement categorized the tragic event as a bizarre, isolated tragedy, hoping the heavy caliber of the weapon would quickly lead them to an underground black market dealer. They fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the threat, unaware that this unprovoked ambush set a terrifying precedent. It marked the precise beginning of a calculated, nocturnal hunting campaign targeting young couples parked in quiet residential spaces. The autumn of 1976 brought a profound realization to the detectives of the New York City Police Department. On October 23rd, the quiet residential streets of Flushing, Queens became the next hunting ground. A young couple sat in a parked vehicle on a secluded tree-lined block when a man approached the doors and fired a heavy caliber weapon through the glass. Both victims survived the devastating ambush, but the ballistic evidence recovered from the shattered interior sent shock waves through the local precinct. Forensic technicians in the police laboratory placed the deformed projectiles under a comparison microscope alongside the evidence from the Buhar Avenue tragedy. The distinctive riffling marks on the lead matched with absolute precision, confirming the exact same .44 caliber Bulldog revolver fired the rounds. The realization that a single predator stalked the outer boroughs forced the police department to take unprecedented action. Leadership established the Omega Task Force, a massive centralized unit dedicated to capturing the phantom shooter. They commanded a large fluorescent lit room at the precinct, filling it with metal desks, corkboards, and ringing rotary telephones. 200 dedicated investigators worked overlapping shifts, poring over stacks of field reports and verified public tips. Detectives combed through thousands of firearm registration records, hunting for anyone possessing a .44 caliber weapon. The massive volume of paperwork overwhelmed the analog filing systems of the era, creating severe logistical bottlenecks. Detectives tracked down legal gun owners one by one, bringing them into the station for intense questioning and ballistic testing. The rigid protocols of this mass interview strategy drained immense manpower. Despite this monumental mobilization of police resources, the task force found itself grasping at shadows while the Phantom prepared his next strike. The investigation encountered a massive forensic hurdle due to conflicting eyewitness testimonies from the surviving victims and terrified bystanders. The attacker struck in deep darkness, standing just outside the illumination radius of the sodium street lamps before retreating into narrow alleyways. Survivors described a clean-shaven young man, a middle-aged suspect with a dark beard, and a heavy-set figure with blonde hair. Police sketch artists produced a dozen different composite drawings, each contradicting the last, turning the citywide manhunt into an impossible puzzle. The Omega Task Force plastered these conflicting faces across subway stations and bogies, generating thousands of false alarms from anxious citizens. Detectives chased these useless leads across the rigid geographical boundaries of the Bronx and Queens, wasting precious time interviewing innocent men who resembled a flawed sketch. Desperate for a breakthrough, investigators consulted criminal psychiatrists to build a working profile of the unknown assailant. The experts described an isolated, disorganized paranoiac who lacked the intelligence to maintain a steady job. This specific psychological framework created a dangerous blind spot for the authorities. Patrol officers ignored ordinary, unassuming men who held steady government employment, assuming the predator must look like a raving lunatic. The rigid adherence to this flawed psychiatric profile allowed the true culprit to navigate the police barricades without drawing a single suspicious glance. He drove his car right past marked police cruisers, hiding his lethal intentions behind a mask of profound mediocrity. The task force chased a phantom defined by bad science, leaving the citizens exposed to the escalating danger. The precise geography of the Hutchinson River Parkway provided the backdrop for a brutal escalation in April 1977. 18-year-old Valentina Suriani and 20-year-old Alexander Iso parked their vehicle on a dark, secluded service road just yards away from the highway traffic. A dense canopy of spring foliage blocked the moonlight, creating a deep pocket of shadows around their car. The silent predator approached from the rear blind spot, closing the distance over the wet grass before unleashing his heavy-caliber weapon into the passenger compartment. Both young victims sustained fatal injuries, transforming the quiet, romantic spot into a scene of profound tragedy. When first responders arrived, they discovered a chilling new element resting near the driver's side door on the asphalt. The killer left a hand-printed letter addressed to New York City Police Department, Captain Joseph Borelli, written in stark block letters. This physical document transformed the localized manhunt into a terrifying psychological war against law enforcement. Crime scene technicians placed the pages into pristine evidence bags, rushing them to the downtown laboratory for intense scrutiny. Forensics teams dusted the paper for latent fingerprints, but the author utilized tremendous caution, leaving zero ridge details behind. Handwriting experts analyzed the strange syntax and bizarre block lettering, searching for matching files in the criminal database without success. The letter contained mabred references to dark urges and a new, self-assigned moniker that declared his ultimate authority. The author named himself the Son of Sam, anchoring his grim mythos in the public consciousness. Law enforcement realized they faced an adversary who craved the spotlight and possessed the calculated discipline to leave no physical trace. The predator escalated his psychological grip on the metropolis by reaching beyond the private channels of police communication. In late May, a heavy paper envelope entered the massive postal sorting facility in Manhattan, moving along the canvas conveyor belts until it reached the mailroom of the Daily News building. The letter bore the name of Jimmy Breslin, a prominent columnist known for capturing the gritty voice of the city. Breslin opened the envelope in his bustling, smoke-filled office, reading the bizarre block text that praised his journalistic work while promising further nocturnal attacks. The unknown author utilized disturbing phrasing, expressing a deep desire to prowl the nighttime streets in search of fresh targets. Breslin contacted the police without hesitation, handing over the pristine document to detectives who cordoned off his desk and bagged the evidence. The top brass of the New York City Police Department faced an agonizing high-stakes decision regarding the explosive material. They understood that publishing the text would induce widespread panic, yet they hoped the distinctive handwriting might trigger recognition from a family member or coworker. The department authorized the Daily News to print sections of the letter, flooding the newsstands with the exact words of the killer on the front page. Millions of citizens purchased the morning edition, holding the tangible proof of the nightmare in their bare hands. The publication transformed the silent stalker into a towering, omnipresent boogeyman in the eyes of the terrified public. The task force switchboards lit up with a relentless barrage of calls, overloading the precinct circuits with frantic, useless tips. The bold communication strategy backfired on the police, failing to generate a single valid lead while feeding the massive ego of the man holding the weapon. The immediate aftermath of the newspaper publication triggered a profound shift in the social dynamics of New York City. The established pattern of the .44 caliber attacks revealed a distinct preference for young women with long dark hair. A wave of intense fear swept through the boroughs, compelling residents to alter their physical appearances in a desperate bid for survival. Beauty salons across the metropolis reported severe shortages of blonde dye as women sought to erase their resemblance to the previous victims. Teenagers and young adults abandoned the quiet residential parking strips, leaving the once crowded avenues desolate after dark. Discotheques and movie theaters mandated strict curfews, and fathers armed themselves with baseball bats to escort their daughters from subway stations to their front doors. The Omega Task Force capitalized on this heightened vigilance by launching massive stakeout operations across known parking areas in Queens and the Bronx. Detectives sat in unmarked sedans for hours, sweltering in the summer humidity while scanning the tree lines for any signs of movement. Despite the massive police presence, the sheer geographical expanse of the outer boroughs made total coverage impossible. The task force commanders rotated officers through grueling double shifts, stretching the municipal budget to its absolute breaking point. Weeks dragged on with no new forensic breakthroughs, forcing investigators to re-interview old witnesses and cross-reference dead-end license plate numbers. The empty spaces between the official updates gnawed at the public trust, creating a dangerous vacuum of authority. The city baked under a relentless heat wave, and the collective anxiety reached a boiling point as July approached. The fragile nerves of the metropolis shattered on the sweltering night of July 13, 1977. A massive lightning strike crimped the primary electrical grid, plunging all 5 boroughs into sudden total darkness. Streetlights, neon signs, and apartment windows went black at the exact same moment, transforming the vibrant urban landscape into a pitch-blind maze. The mechanical hum of air conditioners died out, replaced by the eerie, echoing sounds of breaking glass and distant sirens. Widespread looting and arson erupted in commercial districts, pulling thousands of patrol officers away from the Omega Task Force stakeouts to deal with the immediate chaos. Citizens huddled in their stifling apartments by candlelight, gripping heavy objects and waiting for the phantom to use the blackout as cover for a massive strike. The sheer terror of the darkened city provided a perfect psychological hunting ground for a predator who thrived on public fear. Detectives stranded at the precinct house resorted to battery-powered radios, listening in frustration to the overwhelming volume of emergency dispatch calls. The massive blackout lasted for 25 grueling hours, exhausting the police force and leaving the neighborhood patrols depleted. When the power grid flickered back to life, the department discovered the .44 caliber killer had not attacked during the darkness. The lack of action during the blackout contradicted every psychiatric profile that labeled the suspect an opportunistic madman. He possessed the terrifying patience to wait for the exact right moment, watching the city tear itself apart from the shadows. The task force regrouped in the glowing fluorescence of their central room, unaware that the final decisive confrontation lingered just weeks away. The suffocating heat of late summer pushed the terror into a completely new jurisdiction on July 31st, 1977. For an entire year, the Phantom restricted his hunting grounds to the familiar grids of the Bronx and Queens. However, on this sweltering night, the threat materialized in the quiet Bath Beach neighborhood of Brooklyn. 20-year-old Stacy Moskonutz and her date, 20-year-old Robert Violante, sought relief from the heavy air near a local park. They parked their vehicle under the tall lamps lining the Shore Parkway, a popular pedestrian promenade offering sweeping views of the dark water. The geographical layout featured a wide avenue flanked by grassy medians on one side and residential brick structures on the other. A thick line of trees bordered the concrete walkway, casting long, deep shadows across the pavement. The young couple sat in the front seats of the stationary car, talking quietly while the surrounding streets remained virtually deserted. Without warning, a figure emerged from the canopy of shadows near the park perimeter and rapidly closed the distance to the passenger door. He raised the familiar .44 caliber weapon and fired multiple heavy rounds through the glass into the confined space. Stacy sustained catastrophic injuries that would soon end her young life, while Robert suffered devastating trauma to his eyes. The silent assailant turned away from the shattered vehicle, melting back into the humid Brooklyn night. He believed he had executed another flawless ambush, entirely unaware that a mundane administrative protocol had just sealed his fate. In the immediate moments following the attack, a local resident named Kekelia Davis walked her dog down a nearby residential block. The quiet street featured uniform rows of two-story houses and a line of vehicles parked tightly against the curb. She stood near an intersection located just a few blocks from the Shore Parkway promenade, listening to the sudden eruption of police sirens in the distance. A young man walking with a bizarre, stiff gait approached her position on the concrete sidewalk. He brushed past her in a hurried manner, clutching a dark object against his side before disappearing down the avenue. Her attention shifted from the strange pedestrian to a bright yellow Ford Galaxy parked illegally next to a red fire hydrant. A distinct neon orange parking citation rested beneath the metal wiper blade on the windshield, fluttering slightly in the stagnant air. She recalled a patrol officer writing out that specific ticket just minutes before the distant sounds of chaos erupted. When the police descended upon the Bath Beach neighborhood to investigate the shooting, Davis stepped forward with this seemingly trivial observation. She provided detectives with a precise timeline of the man walking past the ticketed yellow vehicle. For months, the Omega Task Force possessed a mountain of useless psychiatric profiles, but now they held a tangible piece of bureaucratic paperwork. A routine municipal fine for an obstructed fire hydrant provided the precise chronological anchor the investigators desperately needed. Detectives from the New York City Police Department seized the parking enforcement logs from the local precinct house. They combed through the carbon copy citations issued in the Bath Beach sector during the exact window of the attack. The paperwork revealed a single citation written for a yellow 1971 Ford Galaxy parked beside a hydrant. Investigators ran the license plate numbers through the Central Motor Vehicle Database, tracing the registration to a residential address outside the city limits. The vehicle belonged to a 24-year-old postal worker named David Berkowitz, residing in a large apartment complex on Pine Street in Yonkers. This revelation exposed a massive flaw in the task force profiling strategy, as the suspect held steady federal employment and completely blended into ordinary society. On the morning of August 10th, detectives drove north into Westchester County, coordinating with the Yonkers police force to secure the perimeter of the building. The brick apartment structure sat on a steep hill, commanding a view of the Hudson River and offering a sprawling parking lot in the rear. Investigators located the yellow Ford Galaxy sitting empty on the asphalt and approached the vehicle with extreme caution. Looking through the passenger windows, detectives spotted a loaded rifle resting on the rear bench and a duffel bag filled with ammunition. Resting in plain sight beside the weapons was a crisp standard envelope addressed to the Omega Task Force containing a brand new hand-printed letter. The discovery of this unsent communication cemented their absolute certainty that the phantom shooter lived inside the complex. The commanding officers established a tight surveillance net around the Pine Street parking lot, hiding in unmarked sedans under the fading afternoon sun. They waited for hours as the shadows lengthened across the concrete, their hands resting on their service weapons. At approximately 10 o'clock at night, the heavy glass doors of the apartment lobby swung open. A stocky man with dark curly hair walked out into the humid air, carrying a brown paper bag in his right hand. He moved with casual confidence, approaching the yellow Ford Galaxy and unlocking the driver's side door with a metallic click. Before he could turn the ignition cylinder, multiple detectives lunged from their hidden positions, rushing across the asphalt with their firearms drawn. They surrounded the vehicle in a tight perimeter, shouting commands to the man sitting behind the steering wheel. David Berkowitz turned his head toward the blinding beams of the police flashlights, making no sudden movements and offering zero resistance. He wore a placid, arrogant smile on his face, observing the frantic energy of the heavily armed authorities. The lead detective ordered him out of the car, demanding to know his identity. The postal worker maintained his unnerving grin and spoke in a soft, completely relaxed tone. He simply stated, "Well, you got me," introducing himself as the son of Sam. The horrifying myth that paralyzed a metropolis for over a year dissolved instantly, revealing an entirely ordinary mail sorter who hid his darkness behind a mask of profound mediocrity. The authorities transported the captured suspect down to police headquarters, placing him inside a stark windowless interrogation room. Over the course of the night, David Berkowitz delivered a sprawling, detailed confession to the veteran detectives. He recounted the precise chronological sequence of the attacks, supplying intimate facts regarding the crime scenes that only the true assailant could possess. However, he anchored his admission in a bizarre narrative designed to completely absolve himself of personal agency. He claimed he acted upon the strict, unrelenting orders of a demonic entity residing inside his neighbor, a man named Sam Carr. He told investigators that this ancient demon communicated its horrific demands through the incessant barking of Carr's black Labrador retriever. This supernatural tale triggered intense scrutiny from a panel of court-appointed psychiatrists tasked with evaluating his mental fitness. The defense team initially attempted to utilize these statements to construct a robust case for legal insanity, hoping to shield him from a standard prison sentence. The medical professionals conducted exhaustive interviews, probing the boundaries of his supposed delusions in a clinical setting. Ultimately, they penetrated his deceptive facade, declaring him legally competent to comprehend the charges and stand trial for his actions. The psychiatric consensus affirmed that his calculated nocturnal hunts demonstrated a high level of organized thinking entirely incompatible with absolute madness. In May 1978, the legal proceedings reached a swift and decisive conclusion inside a heavily guarded courtroom. David Berkowitz stood before the judge and entered a formal plea of guilty to 6 counts of his catastrophic crimes. This admission bypassed a lengthy, agonizing trial, sparing the surviving victims and grieving families the trauma of testifying on the public stand. The presiding judge delivered a massive sentence, handing down 6 consecutive life terms in the state penitentiary. The heavy wooden doors of the courtroom swung shut, finalizing the legal victory for a city pushed to the brink of collapse. The conviction brought a wave of intense collective relief to the millions of residents inhabiting the 5 boroughs. The oppressive, suffocating era known as the Summer of Sam officially ended, allowing teenagers to return to the nighttime streets without paralyzing fear. Hardware stores stopped selling out of heavy locks, and beauty salons no longer faced massive shortages of blonde hair dye. The conclusion of the case highlighted a profound truth regarding criminal investigations. The grand, elaborate psychological profiles failed completely, while a single piece of municipal paper exposed the predator hiding in plain sight. Years after the massive steel gates locked behind him, David Berquist completely dismantled his own supernatural mythos. During a prison interview, he openly admitted that the entire story involving the demon dog was a complete fabrication. He confessed that he invented the bizarre tale as a calculated legal strategy, attempting to secure an insanity plea and avoid the harsh reality of a maximum security cell. The horrific truth remained that he acted purely on his own violent urges, seeking power and notoriety at the expense of innocent lives. This admission offered little solace to the families who lost their children on those quiet, dark avenues. The enduring pain of his actions continues to ripple through the generations of those affected by the senseless violence. As of his latest parole board hearing in May 2026, the commissioners decisively denied his request for release. He continues to serve his consecutive life sentences, growing old within the rigid concrete walls of the correctional facility. His legacy stands as a chilling reminder that the most dangerous individuals often wear the most ordinary faces. Yet, he was not the only arrogant predator who used bizarre letters to torment the authorities while hiding among ordinary citizens. In fact, another monster remained completely silent for over 25 years, only to orchestrate his own downfall by sending a single desperate envelope to a local newspaper. In March of the year 2004, the mailroom clerks at the Wichita Eagle newspaper sorted through the daily pile of mundane letters, unaware they were holding a ghost. One standard plain white envelope contained a single sheet of paper and a dark photocopy of a missing driver license belonging to a woman who had met a grim end decades prior. The communication shattered a deafening 25-year silence, marking the return of an arrogant phantom who could no longer endure being forgotten by the public. This solitary envelope forced local law enforcement into a state of shock, simultaneously terrifying the city and handing investigators the exact thread of fresh evidence they desperately needed. Wichita in the early 1970s stood as a proud beacon of Midwestern industry. Recognized across the nation as the air capital of the world, the city skyline featured the massive hangars and manufacturing plants of Cessna, Beechcraft, and Boeing. Below the flight paths, quiet suburban sprawl stretched across the flat Kansas plains. Neighborhoods consisted of single-story ranch homes with manicured lawns separated by wide oak-lined streets. Children rode bicycles on these streets until the sodium streetlights flickered to life. The community anchored itself in traditional values, with local churches acting as the primary social hubs for families to gather every Sunday morning. Violent crime remained an abstract concept, relegated to evening news broadcasts about distant coastal cities. Trust ran deep among residents, making it a common practice for families to leave their front doors unlocked. During the sweltering summer months, windows remained propped open to catch the evening breeze, protected only by flimsy wire screens. This innate sense of absolute security created an idyllic environment for raising children. It also provided a perfect hunting ground for a predator hiding behind the mask of a devoted family man. The quiet predictability of these neighborhoods ensured that any disruption would send shock waves through the collective psyche. Joseph Otero, a devoted husband and father, embraced this quiet Midwestern promise. He had retired from a long career in the United States Air Force and moved his family into a modest single-story home on Edgemore Drive. This property sat in a quiet residential tract on the east side of Wichita. The physical layout of the Otero home mirrored countless others on the block. It featured a short concrete driveway, a small front porch, and a backyard bordered by low chain-link fencing. Joseph worked as an instructor for the local aviation mechanics program, providing a stable, comfortable life for his wife, Julie, and their children. Julie spent her days managing the household, attending school functions, and weaving the family into the fabric of the neighborhood. Their daily routine revolved around strict school schedules, evening family dinners, and weekend yard chores. Neighbors saw the Otero children playing in the front yard, their laughter echoing down the wide asphalt street. Inside the home, the layout was practical and intimate, featuring a narrow central hallway connecting the modest bedrooms to the main living area. The Otero family represented the quintessential American dream of the era, unaware they had attracted the attention of a stalker. A local municipal worker drove down those very streets on a daily basis, noting their schedules and mapping the vulnerabilities of their neighborhood. The safety they felt inside their own walls was merely an illusion waiting to break. The illusion of Midwestern safety dissolved on the frigid morning of January 15, 1974. The older Otero children returned home from school that afternoon. Walking up the familiar concrete driveway, they opened the unlocked front door and stepped inside. The house felt vacant, devoid of the usual sounds of their parents and younger siblings. Stepping through the threshold, the children walked down the narrow central hallway. There, they made a grim discovery that would haunt the city for decades. Joseph, Julie, and two of their younger children lay bound and lifeless in different rooms of the house. The physical scene presented a terrifying puzzle to the first responding officers who flooded Edgemore Drive. Seasoned detectives gornoned off the property, walking through the modest floor plan searching for answers. They found no shattered glass, no broken locks, and zero signs of forced entry. The perpetrator had simply walked through the front door, utilizing the family's trusting nature against them. The intricate knots used to secure the victims revealed a calculated approach rather than an act of sudden passion. Investigators scoured the quiet street for witnesses, but the cold winter morning had kept neighbors indoors. This left the police with a total absence of actionable leads. The tragic loss of an entire family within their own home sent a paralyzing wave of dread across Wichita. As the autumn chill arrived in October of 1974, a bizarre communication shifted the case from a local tragedy into a hunt for a serial predator. A young man received an anonymous phone call directing him to the Wichita Public Library located downtown. The voice on the phone instructed him to look inside a specific mechanical engineering textbook hidden deep within the library stacks. The man traveled to the library and navigated to the third floor. Upon locating the heavy volume, he discovered a single piece of paper tucked between the pages. He surrendered the letter to the police at the nearest precinct. The letter contained impossible-to-know meticulous details about the Otero crime scene. The writer listed the exact type of nylon cord used and the specific placement of the victims. The author claimed full responsibility for the home invasion, writing with a sickening sense of grandiosity and control. Within the text, the writer coined a terrifying three-letter moniker for himself. This chosen name was based on his precise methods of restraining and silencing his targets. He promised law enforcement that his work remained unfinished and that he would inevitably strike again. This brazen library letter exposed a critical vulnerability in the investigative process. Detectives realized they were dealing with an organized individual who monitored the media to feed his own ego. The chilling admission forced police to acknowledge that a phantom was walking among them, going to work, and blending into the conservative fabric of the city. Following the Otero tragedy, a heavy blanket of paranoia descended upon the sprawling grid of Wichita neighborhoods. Homeowners rushed to hardware stores on Douglas Avenue, purchasing deadbolts and heavy wooden dowels to secure their sliding glass windows. Law enforcement patrols saturated the eastern subdivisions, yet the Phantom Predator continued to map new targets across the city layout. He shifted his focus toward young independent women living in modest apartments and single-story houses. The perpetrator moved in absolute silence, breaching private sanctuaries to steal futures and shatter families. Detectives processed these grim crime scenes with intense precision, dusting wooden door frames and glass panes for latent fingerprints. Forensics teams managed to lift clear, distinct ridges left behind by the intruder. However, law enforcement faced a massive technological wall during the mid-1970s. The automated fingerprint identification system did not yet exist on a national scale. Investigators had to rely on a painstaking manual comparison process. Detectives sat in windowless basement offices for weeks, physical holding magnifying glasses over thousands of paper fingerprint cards. They pulled records of known burglars and violent offenders from the municipal archives. Every single card yielded a negative result. The killer possessed no prior criminal record, rendering the lifted prints useless without a direct suspect. He remained an invisible entity, hiding behind a pristine public record. The predator refused to remain in the shadows, craving the spotlight of public terror. He began a systematic campaign of psychological warfare against the residents and the police department. He mailed taunting letters and twisted, handwritten poems to the Cake television station located on North Gleason Drive. News anchors opened standard envelopes to find communications littered with intentional misspellings and arrogant declarations of superiority. The writer demanded attention, criticizing the police for their inability to catch him. Investigators mandated that local media withhold the most specific details of these letters from the public broadcasts. They needed to filter out false confessors and preserve the integrity of the investigation. Hoping to coax the narcissist out of hiding, the Wichita Police Department established a dedicated telephone hotline in the late 1970s. Technicians installed banks of heavy rotary phones inside a cramped command center at the central precinct. Detectives worked grueling 12-hour shifts, drinking stale coffee while waiting for a specific arrogant voice to come through the receiver. Citizens flooded the lines with thousands of tips, reporting suspicious neighbors and strange vehicles parked on side streets. Investigators tracked down every single lead, knocking on doors across the county and conducting countless field interviews. Despite the massive allocation of resources, the hotline yielded zero actionable intelligence. The perpetrator was far too calculated to make a traceable call from his own home. The brazen nature of the attacks escalated in December of 1977. A 25-year-old woman named Nancy Fox lived in a small, single-story brick apartment on South Pershing Street. A heavy wooden door and a standard locking mechanism separated her quiet living space from the outside world. The stalker severed her telephone lines from the exterior pole before forcing his way inside. After stealing her life, the predator committed an act of staggering audacity. He walked away from the apartment complex, navigating the dark streets until he reached a public payphone situated outside a downtown grocery store. He lifted the heavy plastic receiver, dropped a coin into the slot, and dialed the emergency dispatch center. The caller reported his own horrific act, providing the dispatcher with the exact street address before vanishing into the crisp night air. Patrol cruisers raced to the phone booth, their sirens wailing through the empty commercial district Officers arrived to find the booth abandoned, the receiver hanging loose and swaying by its metal cord. Forensics teams dusted the heavy plastic handset and the glass booth panels, securing another set of pristine fingerprints. Detectives believed this arrogant mistake would break the case wide open. They ran the prints through local civil service databases, but restrictive municipal policies prevented the cross-referencing of ordinary city employees with criminal investigations without a specific warrant. The exact man they were hunting worked a quiet government job just miles away. Yet a rigid bureaucratic wall kept his file isolated from the detective bureau. The agonizing search dragged into the 1980s, stretching the resources and morale of the Wichita police force to the absolute breaking point. The predator expanded his hunting grounds to Park City, a small, quiet suburb situated just north of the main Wichita city limits. He targeted Marine Hedge, a woman living in a standalone house located on a quiet dead-end street. The perpetrator lived mere houses away on that exact same street, monitoring her daily routine from his own driveway. He stalked her movements, noting the precise time she left for work and when she returned to her quiet domestic life. Following her tragic demise, the killer took her vehicle, leaving it parked outside a bowling alley on the opposite side of town to confuse investigators. The physical distance between the crime scene and the abandoned vehicle forced police to expand their geographical search grid. Detectives spent the following months conducting massive neighborhood sweeps. They knocked on doors, checking alibis, and requesting voluntary saliva samples from thousands of local men. Forensic science advanced at a rapid pace, and investigators banked on emerging blood typing methods to narrow the suspect pool. However, without a strong legal precedent, judges refused to issue mandatory mass swabbing warrants based on geographical proximity alone. The killer declined to provide a voluntary sample, blending into the crowd of uncooperative citizens. This specific legal limitation allowed the monster to wave away detectives from his front porch without raising a single red flag. By the year 1991, the violent strikes and arrogant letters ceased. The phantom vanished into thin air, leaving behind a profound silence that tormented the Wichita Police Department for over a decade. The investigation transitioned into an agonizing cold case. The Central Precinct maintained a dedicated room filled from floor to ceiling with heavy cardboard banker boxes. Thousands of case files, handwritten interview notes, and physical evidence logs accumulated dust. Veteran detectives who had sacrificed their marriages and their health to the hunt began reaching retirement age. They handed over thick, worn binders to a new generation of investigators, pleading with them to never let the case die. During this dark, quiet decade, law enforcement refused to remain idle. Younger detectives incorporated the newly expanded automated fingerprint identification system into their daily routine. Every single week, investigators took the pristine latent prints lifted from the 1970s crime scenes and ran them through the modernized digital database. The heavy computer monitors hummed as the system scanned millions of criminal records from across the country. Week after week, year after year, the screen flashed a negative result. The perpetrator had never been arrested for so much as a minor traffic violation. His clean record rendered the most advanced forensic tool of the 1990s useless, cementing his status as an untraceable ghost. The deafening silence broke in March of the year 2004. The arrival of the Wichita Eagle letter sent shock waves through the Central Precinct, reactivating the frozen investigation. Police Chief Norman Williams authorized the formation of a massive modernized task force to hunt the resurfaced predator. Investigators commandeered a large, secure room at the headquarters, lining the walls with digital maps, timelines, and glowing computer terminals. They recognized a critical shift in the perpetrator's psychological profile. He had grown older, yet his desperate, consuming need for public relevance remained stronger than his instinct for self-preservation. Over the following months, the killer accelerated his communications, mailing a bizarre assortment of packages to local news stations and police precincts. He sent empty cereal boxes, complex word puzzles, and plastic dolls bound with the exact same intricate knots he used on his victims. Detectives cataloged every single item, swabbing the cardboard and plastic for trace DNA evidence with strict precision. Forensic scientists utilized advanced Mallory's chain reaction technology to amplify microscopic skin cells found on the adhesive flaps of the envelopes. This exhaustive process isolated a partial genetic profile of the sender. The task force held the perpetrator's biological signature in their hands. However, just like the fingerprints decades prior, running the DNA profile through the National Registry returned 0 matches, forcing detectives to pivot their strategy toward psychological manipulation. The task force initiated a high-stakes cat-and-mouse game, utilizing televised press conferences as a line of communication with the predator. The lead detectives stood behind podiums, staring straight into the broadcast cameras. They crafted their statements to stroke the killer's massive ego while masking their own desperation. They acknowledged his intelligence and pleaded for him to open a dialogue, playing the role of baffled students asking a master for guidance. The narcissistic perpetrator took the bait. He began leaving physical packages at specific public dead drops across the city. He hid a manila envelope inside a lumber rack at a local hardware store on Woodlawn Avenue. Weeks later, he left another package leaning against a street sign in a crowded public park. Investigators scrambled to map these exact physical locations, deploying undercover surveillance units to watch the drop zones. Plainclothes officers sat in unmarked sedans for hours, their eyes scanning the parking lots for any suspicious movement. Time and time again, the killer slipped through the surveillance net, dropping his packages in the brief blind spots between patrol shifts. Detectives reviewed grainy security camera footage, watching an unidentifiable pickup truck drive away just minutes before they arrived on the scene. The back-and-forth communication escalated the tension in the command center to a fever pitch. The task force knew the arrogant phantom was engaging them, blinded by his own vanity, unaware that his desperate need to prove his superiority was steering him toward a catastrophic error. The predator felt invincible. His arrogance clouded his judgment. He crafted a fatal inquiry in February of the year 2005. He typed a specific message on a piece of paper. He dropped this note inside a cereal box at a home improvement store located on North Woodlawn Street. The message asked the police a direct technical question. He wanted to know if a standard floppy disk possessed internal tracking components. He demanded an honest answer in the local newspaper. Detectives convened inside the windowless command center at headquarters. They recognized a massive, unprecedented opportunity. Law enforcement protocols dictated absolute truth in public communications. The task force commander authorized a direct violation of this unwritten rule. They placed a small coded advertisement in the classified section of the Wichita Eagle. The printed text assured the sender that floppy disks remained secure from tracking software. The trap was set. The detectives waited for the phantom to make his move. The trap snapped shut days later. A padded envelope arrived at a local television station situated on Northwest Street. Newsroom clerks handed the package over to law enforcement without hesitation. Detectives opened the parcel inside a sterile evidence room. They found a standard purple magnetic storage disk resting inside. A specialized computer forensics technician took possession of the magnetic storage device. He inserted the object into an isolated secure terminal. The surface files contained mundane Word documents and taunting letters. The technician ignored the visible text. He explored the underlying digital architecture of the disk. He utilized specific software programs to recover deleted digital footprints buried within the magnetic sectors. A hidden string of metadata appeared on the glowing screen. The data revealed the precise location of the last file modification. The files originated from a public computer terminal located inside the Park City Library. The author tag displayed a single, common first name. The screen read the name Dennis. A secondary piece of metadata accompanied the first name. The digital footprint linked the user profile to the Christ Lutheran Church. Detectives rushed to their own computer terminals. The massive, multi-decade mystery unraveled through a simple internet query. Investigators searched the digital church registry. The search results displayed the congregation leadership roster. The name Dennis Rader appeared at the top of the list. He held the position of Congregation Council President. Detectives pulled his municipal employment file from the city archives. The file revealed his position as an animal control and local ordinance compliance officer for Park City. This specific job granted him unquestioned authority to patrol quiet suburban streets. It allowed him to measure grass lengths, inspect fences, and note the daily schedules of his neighbors. Law enforcement realized the sheer horror of their discovery. The Phantom was not a transient drifter or a brilliant mastermind. He was a banal, ordinary bureaucrat hiding in plain sight. The decades of agonizing terror culminated in the unmasking of a mediocre man who trusted a newspaper classified advertisement. The apprehension occurred on the morning of February 25th, the year 2005. A line of unmarked police cruisers intercepted Dennis Rader as he drove toward his home in Park City. Armed tactical officers surrounded his vehicle on a quiet residential street. Rader surrendered without a physical struggle. Detectives placed him in the back of a patrol car inside the interrogation room at headquarters. Investigators observed a man consumed by confusion. He expressed profound betrayal concerning the newspaper advertisement. His narcissistic worldview shattered in an instant. Realizing he possessed no escape route, Rader abandoned his silence. He waived his constitutional rights. Over the course of a staggering 30-hour interview, he confessed to every single intrusion. He detailed his exact methods, matching the held-back forensic evidence. He displayed zero remorse. The task force recorded every word, securing the final pieces of an airtight prosecution. The pursuit of justice moved to the Sedgwick County Courthouse in late June. Rader stood before a packed courtroom. The audience included decades of grieving family members seeking closure. The state of Kansas lacked a legal avenue to pursue capital punishment for historical offenses committed before the year 1994. Rader accepted a binding plea agreement to avoid a protracted, agonizing trial process. He stood at the wooden defense podium. The judge required him to provide a factual basis for his plea. Rader recited the specific, horrific details of his 10 separate offenses. He spoke in a flat, monotone voice, treating the loss of human life like an inventory checklist. He described his victims as simple projects. This chilling display of utter detachment horrified the seasoned legal professionals present. The court convicted him of 10 separate counts of first-degree offenses. The judge delivered the maximum possible penalty allowed by the historical statutes. The gavel fell, ending the legal proceedings. Dennis Rader received 10 consecutive life sentences. The combined penalty totaled 175 years behind concrete walls. Corrections officials transferred him to the El Dorado Correctional Facility. Prison administrators classified him as an absolute security risk. They placed him in permanent solitary confinement. The authorities stripped him of all access to media, preventing him from feeding his narcissism. The man who craved public attention vanished into total obscurity. The Wichita community reclaimed their streets, locking their doors, but refusing to live in fear. A mundane floppy disk had pierced the armor of a monster who believed he was untouchable. His massive ego provided the digital key needed to lock him away. Yet, while this arrogant predator used primitive technology to seal his own fate, a different breed of stalker weaponized the digital world to achieve the exact opposite. In our next case, an avalanche of electronic messages would create a perfect digital ghost. This relentless stream of modern communication served as an impenetrable smokescreen for a devastating loss of life. In late 2012, Dave Krupa sat in his Omaha apartment, his cellular phone vibrating against the coffee table. Hundreds of hostile, erratic text messages flooded his screen, all sent from a woman he had dated for just 2 weeks, Carrie Fover. The text demanded he stay away, yet at the same time described the specific details of what he was wearing and who he was with, proving the sender was watching his every move. What Dave did not know, as he stared at the glowing screen in sheer disbelief, was that the real Carrie Fover was gone. The person orchestrating this digital onslaught was sitting right next to him on the couch. This deafening barrage of messages was an elaborate, calculated illusion, a digital smokescreen designed to mask a brutal, permanent end. The city of Omaha, Nebraska, stretches across the Midwestern plains, characterized by sweeping highways and bustling commercial districts, illuminated by high-sodium streetlights. In the autumn of 2012, this growing metropolis served as a hub for working professionals who navigated a modern landscape of digital dating and casual encounters. Dave Krupa managed an auto repair shop located just off a busy commercial strip. The shop was a chaotic environment of hydraulic lifts, echoing metallic clanks and the heavy scent of motor oil. Seeking companionship outside of his demanding work hours, Dave created an online dating profile. He was looking for casual, non-exclusive relationships, a point he made clear to anyone he met. Through this platform, he connected with a woman named Shana Golar. The two began spending time together navigating a loose arrangement that suited Dave's desire for independence. Shana would on certain nights visit his apartment, a modest ground floor unit situated a few miles away from his repair shop. Their dynamic appeared mundane, just another fleeting connection in a vast city of strangers. Dave maintained a firm boundary, refusing to commit to anything serious. He continued to browse dating sites and interact with other women. The physical distance between his home and his workplace provided him with a sense of compartmentalization. He kept his professional duties separated from his private dating life. Carrie Collar stepped into Dave Krupa's auto repair shop one crisp October afternoon, seeking a mechanic to fix her vehicle. Carrie was 37 years old, a brilliant computer programmer, and a devoted single mother. She lived in a quiet, tree-lined residential neighborhood in Macedonia, Iowa, located roughly a 30-minute drive east across the state line. Her life revolved around a strict, predictable routine centered on her teenage son and her demanding career in information technology. She spent her days writing complex code and her evenings attending her son's school events. Finding herself back in the dating scene, she agreed to a date with Dave after a brief conversation at his shop counter. They met for drinks at a local tavern later that week and established a mutual understanding. Carrie shared Dave's preference for a casual arrangement. She had no interest in disrupting her grounded, stable life or introducing a chaotic romance into her son's environment. Her primary focus remained on securing a promotion at work and maintaining her home. The intersection of Dave, Shana, and Carrie seemed harmless at the surface level. None of them lived together, and their interactions were confined to distinct zones across the Omaha metropolitan area. Carrie kept her independence fiercely protected. She viewed her time with Dave as a simple diversion from her intense work schedule. The physical reality of their overlapping lives materialized for just a few seconds on a late October evening. Carrie was leaving Dave's apartment building, walking down the concrete exterior hallway toward the parking lot. At that exact moment, Shana Golar arrived unannounced, walking up the same concrete path to retrieve some personal items she had left inside. Dave stood in the doorway, introducing the two women in passing. They exchanged a brief, polite greeting under the dim amber glow of the hallway light fixture. Carrie walked to her vehicle and drove away, returning to her quiet suburban life. Shanna entered the apartment, gathered her belongings, and left a few minutes later. This fleeting, trivial encounter lasted less than a minute. Neither woman expressed any visible anger or jealousy during the exchange. Carrie returned to her intense programming work, managing her databases and preparing for a major project deadline. Dave continued managing the auto shop, blind to the catastrophic chain reaction this brief meeting would trigger. The physical spaces they occupied remained separate, and the routine of daily life resumed without interruption. To Carrie, Shauna was nothing more than a stranger passing in a dark hallway. She had no reason to suspect that this passing glance would shatter her world. On November 13, 2012, the physical reality of Carrie Fover ceased to exist. She failed to arrive at her office complex, leaving her computer workstation empty and her database projects untouched. Worse, she never arrived to pick up her teenage son from her mother's house, shattering a rigid parental routine she had maintained for years. Her mother, Nancy Rainey, began dialing Kari's cellular phone, listening to the automated voicemail greeting over and over again. Instead of a phone call, Nancy received a sudden, abrupt text message from Carrie's number. The text stated that Carrie had taken a new job in Kansas and was moving away with zero notice. In that same hour, Dave Krupa received a text message from Kari, claiming she wanted to move in with him, when Dave politely declined, citing their casual arrangement. The messages from Kari's phone turned hostile. The sender fired back a vicious response, telling Dave she hated him and never wanted to see him again. At the same time, Carrie's employer received a formal resignation email sent from her professional account. The geographic anchor of Kari's life evaporated in a matter of hours, replaced by a frantic stream of digital data. This sudden shift in communication style baffled everyone who knew her. Carrie was a professional who prioritized grammar and punctuation, yet these new messages contained bizarre spelling errors and erratic phrasing. The tone was aggressive, unhinged, and completely detached from her normal personality. Nancy Rainey knew her daughter would never abandon her son or her hard-earned career through a text message. She drove to the local police precinct to file an official missing person report. The officers documented the details, taking note of Kari's age, physical description, and the timeline of her last known whereabouts. However, a significant jurisdictional and procedural hurdle prevented a full-scale physical search. Because Carrie was a 37-year-old adult, the law permitted her to leave her life behind without notifying her family. The continuous stream of text messages, social media posts, and emails originating from Kari's accounts convinced the initial investigators that she was alive and well. The digital communications provide a perfect alibi, creating an illusion of life that rigid law enforcement protocols could not penetrate. Officers informed Nancy that they could not force an adult to return home against their will. The case was categorized as a voluntary missing adult, freezing any forensic inquiry or search warrant applications. No detectives visited Carrie's apartment to dust for fingerprints or check for signs of a struggle. No crime scene technician sprayed the walls for chemical traces or reviewed the surveillance cameras around Dave's apartment complex. The system relied upon the digital footprint, allowing a sophisticated predator to hijack Kari's identity and halt the justice system in its tracks. The paperwork error was monumental, born from an outdated legal framework that treated digital text as absolute proof of life. While her family begged for physical verification, the police closed the book on the initial disappearance. The physical absence of Carrie Cover left a void that a relentless digital entity filled. Dave Krupa returned to his ground-floor apartment complex every evening to the heavy metallic click of his deadbolt lock. His cellular phone vibrated for hours on the kitchen counter, displaying dozens of hostile messages sent from Carrie's registered phone number. The text contained alarming details regarding the exact time his lights turned off or the specific guests visiting his unit. The sender described watching him from a distance, transforming his modest living quarters into an invisible prison. Shanna Goliar began spending vast amounts of time at Dave's apartment during these stressful weeks, offering her presence as comfort. Shanna claimed that the digital ghost of Carrie had turned its sights on her as well. Her own devices began receiving threatening emails, creating a shared trauma that bonded her closer to Dave. The stalker detailed plans to harm Shanna, forcing Dave to view her as a vulnerable target, needing his protection. Law enforcement officers responded to multiple harassment complaints, yet the invisible nature of the suspect left them empty-handed. Officers advised Dave to change his phone number, a tactic that failed when the stalker acquired the new digits within hours. The perpetrator utilized sophisticated software to disguise the origin of the messages, routing them through anonymous servers. This technical camouflage created an impenetrable barrier against standard police inquiries. Dave lived in a state of constant hypervigilance, scanning the parking lot shadows every time he walked to his vehicle. The psychological torment escalated from digital screens into the physical environment of western Iowa and eastern Nebraska. Shanna Goliar reported multiple acts of severe vandalism to the police, directing their attention to her damaged property. An unseen assailant keyed deep scratches into the paint of her vehicle and shattered the glass windows. The climax of this physical campaign occurred at Big Lake Park, a sprawling recreational area in Council Bluffs featuring dense tree lines and unpaved walking trails. Shanna drove to the remote park area claiming she needed to retrieve items from a storage unit near the boundary line. She dialed emergency dispatchers, stating that a hidden attacker had fired a weapon at her from the brush. First responders arrived to find Shanna with a visible gunshot wound to her left thigh. She provided a statement identifying the shooter as the jealous and deranged Kari Fover. Detectives combed the park grounds, searching the dirt for shell casings or footprints belonging to the missing programmer. They established a physical perimeter and interviewed nearby residents, burning valuable investigative resources on a fabricated crime scene. The police treated the park shooting as a factual assault committed by a dangerous fugitive. This specific incident cemented the narrative that Carrie was alive, armed, and a severe threat to public safety. Authorities issued active warrants for her arrest regarding the harassment and the assault. The system failed to recognize that the supposed victim possessed the exact same caliber weapon used in the park incident. Investigators chased these engineered breadcrumbs across jurisdictional lines, hitting a concrete wall of dead ends. Officers from the Omaha Police Department and the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office attempted to trace the menacing Internet protocol addresses. The network data routed through dozens of proxy servers bouncing signals from different states and foreign countries. Every time a detective submitted a subpoena to an internet service provider, the resulting documents revealed spoofed accounts. The suspect registered email addresses using fabricated names and untraceable prepaid cellular network cards. Detectives received a tip regarding a sighting of Carrie at a local furniture store and spent days reviewing hours of security footage. The footage showed nothing but empty aisles and oblivious shoppers, proving the tip to be another calculated distraction. A defense attorney representing Dave Krupa in a related civil matter attempted to hire private investigators to track the digital signals. The private investigators abandoned the search after exhausting their budget on dead-end server logs. The rigid protocols of the police departments required a physical crime scene to escalate the harassment reports into a major felony investigation, without a distressed living person or an identified physical location. The case file sat in filing cabinets for years. The perpetrator understood the legal loopholes, utilizing the lack of physical evidence to maintain absolute freedom. The daily barrage of threats continued without pause. wearing down the psychological endurance of Dave and Kari's family. Nancy Rainey refused to accept the official police narrative that her daughter had transformed into a violent stalker. She preserved Kari's personal belongings in Macedonia, maintaining the empty house while raising her teenage grandson. The mother endured unimaginable psychological torture, receiving cruel messages on holidays from an entity wearing her daughter's face. 3 exhaustive years passed with this agonizing routine until the case files crossed the desks of specialized investigators. Detectives Ryan A. Views and Jim Doty of the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office opened the boxes of dusty reports. They spread the documents across a large conference table, analyzing the timeline of the disappearance and the subsequent harassment. The 2 seasoned investigators approached the labyrinth of evidence with a foundational, common-sense perspective. They obtained strict court orders to access Kari Ufover's personal and professional financial records. The resulting bank statements revealed a profound and chilling silence. The final recorded transaction on any of Kari's checking or saving accounts occurred on the exact day she vanished in 2012. The investigators recognized the absolute impossibility of an adult female surviving on the run for 3 years without withdrawing a single dollar. A fugitive needs currency to purchase food, secure housing, and maintain cellular network plans. This specific financial revelation dismantled the entire harassment theory in an instant. Avis and Doty classified the situation as a concealed homicide investigation, shifting their focus from a missing person to a master manipulator. The sheriff's office enlisted the expertise of Anthony Cava, a specialist in digital forensics and network architecture. Cava initiated a massive data extraction of the digital footprint left behind by the relentless stalker. He downloaded over 50,000 individual emails and thousands of text messages from the service providers. The digital forensic expert mapped out the transmission times of every single communication sent under Kari's name. He utilized vast spreadsheets to cross-reference these timestamps with the documented daily routines of Dave Kropa and Shana Galyar. A distinct, undeniable pattern emerged from the chaotic web of data points. Cava discovered that the threatening emails required significant periods of uninterrupted computer access to compose and schedule. The timing of the message bursts mirrored the exact hours Shanna was off duty from her employment. The stalker utilized a specific scheduling software application to delay the delivery of texts, creating the illusion of real-time communication. Cava searched the hidden metadata within the headers of the spoofed emails. He identified a minuscule oversight in the routing protocols of a secondary email account. The perpetrator had failed to activate the virtual private network during one specific logon session. This technical error exposed the true Internet Protocol address of the transmitting device. The unmasked network coordinates provided a straight path to a residential router. The unmasked Internet Protocol address corresponded to a specific geographic location in Council Bluffs, Iowa. Investigators drove to the coordinates, parking their unmarked vehicles on the quiet residential street. The address matched the exact residential apartment leased to Shana Galyar. Law enforcement mapped the physical distances between the transmission points and Shana's daily commutes. They realized that every fake email, every threatening text, and every spoofed phone call originated from devices held in Shanna's hands. The horrific reality of the past 3 years materialized in the minds of the detectives. Shanna had sat next to Dave on his living room couch, comforting him about the stalker while at the exact same moment pressing send on the threats. She had vandalized her own vehicle in the dark and fired a bullet into her own leg at Big Lake Park to solidify the deception. This unprecedented campaign of manipulation required thousands of hours of obsessive, meticulous dedication. The detectives understood that the person claiming the status of victim was the true architect of the nightmare. They needed physical proof linking Shanna not just to the cyberstalking, but to the permanent disappearance of Kari Fover. A judge reviewed the overwhelming digital evidence and granted the investigators comprehensive search warrants for Shanna's residence and personal devices. Detectives prepared to breach the digital fortress and uncover the physical truth hiding beneath millions of lines of code. In the early morning hours, a tactical team of investigators arrived at Shanna Golyar's residential complex in Council Bluffs, Iowa. The officers secured the perimeter of the 2-story brick building before breaching the front door of her ground floor unit. Inside the apartment, detectives found a chaotic living space cluttered with scattered electronics, charging cables, and multiple cellular devices. Forensic technicians established a systematic grid pattern across the rooms, photographing every item before placing the hardware into static proof evidence bags. The search yielded a massive haul of digital equipment, including outdated tablets, spare laptop computers, and external storage drives hidden within dresser drawers. Investigators transported this digital arsenal to a secure, climate-controlled laboratory back at the sheriff's office. Digital forensic expert Anthony Cava began the exhaustive process of cloning the hard drives to preserve the original integrity of the data. He utilized specialized software designed to bypass standard passwords and excavate deleted files buried deep within the system registries. The extraction required several days of continuous processing power, sifting through millions of lines of complex computer code. Cava focused his attention on an older, discarded tablet device found beneath a pile of clothing. Within the internal storage of this specific machine, the software detected a hidden partition containing a discarded secure digital memory card. The user had deleted the files years in the past, believing the digital trash bin provided permanent erasure. Cava reconstructed the fractured data packets, piece by piece, bringing the hidden images back to the illuminated screen. The recovered directory contained dozens of photographs that documented the terrifying final hours of Kari Fover. The forensic specialist stared at the monitor as a chilling, definitive photograph loaded onto the display. The image captured a human foot resting against the dark fabric of a vehicle seat. A distinct, recognizable Chinese symbol tattoo marked the skin, matching the permanent ink Kari bore on her own foot. The surrounding lighting and background details matched the interior cabin of Kari's personal sport utility vehicle. Armed with this visual confirmation, detectives expanded their physical search grid back across the state line into Omaha. They located Kari's missing vehicle abandoned in the parking lot of a sprawling apartment complex miles away from Dave Krupa's residence. Crime scene technicians opened the dusty doors and applied chemical reagents to the carpeted floorboards. The reactive spray illuminated massive, invisible stains, soaking the fabric beneath the passenger seat. Laboratory analysis confirmed the dark biological fluid belonged to the missing computer programmer. The pieces of the geographic and digital puzzle locked together in a terrifying sequence. Shanna Golyar had ended Kari's physical life during that initial weekend in November of 2012, driven by an obsessive need to eliminate a perceived romantic rival. She then stole the victim's cellular phone and hijacked her digital identity to maintain a complex multi-year illusion of life. Shanna spent thousands of hours typing out her own fabricated threats, orchestrating a phantom stalker to corner Dave's affection. Her arrogant need to document her victory through digital photography provided the absolute proof required to destroy her alibi. Prosecutors faced a monumental legal challenge as they prepared to indict Shanna Golyar without a physical body to present to a jury. Legal precedents in the state of Nebraska demanded overwhelming circumstantial evidence to secure a conviction in cases lacking recovered remains. The district attorney's office built an impenetrable timeline using the vast spreadsheet of recovered internet protocol addresses, cellular tower pings, and deleted photographs. Authorities placed Shanna under arrest, charging her with the highest degree of criminal homicide. The trial commenced in the spring of 2017, drawing massive media scrutiny to the Omaha courthouse. The defense attorneys attempted to cast doubt on the digital evidence, arguing that an unknown internet hacker could have routed the messages through Shanna's network router. This alternative theory collapsed when the digital forensic experts took the witness stand. Anthony Cava walked the jurors through the intricate data packets, demonstrating the absolute impossibility of a remote hacker framing the defendant. The prosecutors displayed the hidden photographs extracted from the discarded tablet, anchoring the digital phantom to a grim physical reality. They highlighted Shanna's profound arrogance, showing how she attended police interviews as a supposed victim while carrying the victim's memory card in her pocket. The failure of the initial missing person investigation became a focal point of the proceedings, illustrating how rigid legal protocols blinded the first responding officers. The jury recognized that Shanna had weaponized those specific legal loopholes to extend her reign of terror. In August of 2017, the jury foreman handed the final verdict sheet to the presiding judge. The court found Shanna Goliar guilty on all counts, cementing her status as a calculating predator. The judge handed down a maximum sentence of life in a state penitentiary without the possibility of parole. This definitive ruling stripped away her freedom and ended her multi-year psychological torture campaign against the Kropa and Kolover families. Nancy Rainey sat in the gallery, shedding tears as she absorbed the official confirmation of her daughter's tragic fate. Kari's son, who grew into a young man under the shadow of cruel fabricated text messages, received a factual explanation for his mother's sudden absence. The family endured permanent emotional scars from the ordeal, haunted by the memories of receiving hateful words from an entity wearing their loved one's face. The unprecedented digital deception orchestrated by Shanna shattered the traditional methods of missing person investigations across the Midwest. Law enforcement agencies revised their strict protocols regarding verified text messages, realizing that a typing cursor does not equal a living, breathing human being. Carrie Fover lost her life to a chance encounter in a dark hallway, but her legacy forced the justice system to evolve in the modern technological era. The vast digital footprint left behind by the arrogant perpetrator cornered her in a trap of her own making. As the heavy steel doors close on this specific nightmare, we must turn our attention to the final overarching lessons these terrifying cases leave behind. These cases stand as a chilling reminder that the darkest corners of human arrogance often leave an indelible, self-destructive trail. As long as predators feel the overwhelming urge to brag or manipulate from the shadows, their very own messages will continue to be the key to their undoing.